Hello everyone, Mr. John here from Areteem Institute with this week's Thursday Tidbit, where we're continuing last week's video and continuing to talk about weather forecasts and probability of precipitation. So just quick reminder of what the probability of precipitation is. You can check out last week's video, which I'll link below if you want some more information about that. It is a measurement of how likely precipitation, rain, snow, whatever, will happen in a given area. Now, we highlighted this a little bit last week, but it will be important in some of the questions and in some of the discussions again. So I want to emphasize the fact that this is all for a given area, right? You might have a weather forecast for Orange County, or a weather forecast for a state or a city or a zip code, things like that there. Now, let's review our definitions. So what makes this a slightly interesting topic is that there are a couple of different definitions that are used. One of them is this legacy definition. You'll see this used in some places, where here the probability of precipitation is given by C times A, where C is the confidence, so estimated probability. We are 50% confident, 75% confident, 100% confident, etc. And here we have this A, where A is the estimated fraction of the area that gets rain. We'll see this in practicing the first question from last time a little bit, but the idea here is maybe you're 80% confident that 60% of the area will get rain. That is our legacy definition that way as well. Now, a lot of places have moved, and kind of the official definition by a lot of the US government agencies now is this more simplified one. So this simplified one is talking just about C. So PoP, probability of precipitation, is C, where C is just that confidence. But again, let me highlight, now we're talking about somewhere in the area. So if we have a weather forecast for Orange County, and they say 80% chance of rain, that means 80% chance, they're confident 80% that somewhere in Orange County there will be rain tomorrow, next hour, whatever we're talking about in terms of that definition and in terms of the weather forecast that we're actually giving. Now, second definition is definitely simpler. We'll talk about that more throughout the video here, but let's explore that first definition, that legacy definition, and show how a few different things could happen in that scenario. So using the legacy definition, give two different ways that this probability of precipitation could be 50%. And then we're of course going to compare that to the simplified definition, just the confidence you have there. Now, I want to go back and remind us that we're talking about this in a given area. So we're going to do two different scenarios here, but let's draw them out in terms of kind of a grid or a rectangle in this scenario. So I want to talk about these two different scenarios that we have. Both are going to end up with the 50% PoP, right? So both of these in the end will have the probability of precipitation is 50% in that scenario. Now, both of the examples we're going to look at are going to be extreme examples in some scenario, in some definition of the extreme case there. So for this first one, let's say that we have a confidence of 50%. So we're 50% confident that rain will happen. Now it's pretty clear that in that scenario, this area then needs to be 100% of the grid that we have. So if this green rectangle is our area that we're dealing with, right, in this scenario, let me kind of highlight the whole thing and label it with the 50% chance that we have there. So the idea is now, okay, we're 50% confident that somewhere in that grid we will have, or not somewhere, anywhere in the grid we will have rain. So here, just writing out the formula, things are pretty simple in this case. It's going to be 50% times 100% or times 1. And then, of course, that gives you 50% there. Now, what is the other extreme case? What do I mean when I'm talking about the extremes here? Well, what if we're 100% confident in this second scenario? Maybe this is a forecast for the next hour or something, right? So we really have more data about what's happening. What would the A need to be for this to match? Well, in this case, it would need to be here in this scenario, the area would be a 50% in that case. So the picture here looks a little bit different. I'm not going to maybe be able to do this perfectly, but the idea is kind of roughly half of our grid, right? Half of our grid is 100% chance. And let me just label it here of rain. And this is where things get a little bit confusing, right? We're kind of implicitly saying that, okay, there's 0% chance that there's rain on that other half there. That's slightly simplified, right? They're not actually predicting exactly where the rain occurs, but roughly speaking, we're saying, okay, in one scenario, the whole area, all of it, any point has a 50% chance of rain. And in this second scenario, we're saying, well, half of the region has a 100% chance of seeing rain there. So here we have our 100% confidence times 50% area in that case, and we get that 50% probability of precipitation in either scenario. And of course, I mentioned last time, but I'll say it again, you could have infinitely many things here, right? If the confidence goes up from 50%, say we have a 75% confidence, you could have a 66.666% area, and that would give you 50% PoP under this definition and things like that there. Now, I want to say kind of, and compare this to the other second definition, right? So both of these definitions here are with definition 1. And we're going to do a little bit of a spoiler for our next question here a little bit, but let's compare these to our second definition that we would have. So let me look at definition 2, right? So in this first area that we have here, confidence is 50%, right? So by definition 2, the PoP is also 50% there. So that one would totally match, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. In the second one, notice that this is the one that is a lot different. According to definition 2, the probability of precipitation is 100% in that case. It's just the C. In both scenarios for definition 2, only that C value matters in this scenario. And so with this example, we see that there's a lot of difference here with that definition 2. Now, we'll talk about this mathematically for the next question. Really quickly, I want to just talk about this in terms of English and kind of reading comprehension, how you might interpret these things as well. even that is ambiguous, right? Even in a scenario like this, you could make arguments for both definitions. For example, if you're saying, okay, when I talk about the probability of rain in Orange County, you might say that means at a random point, what's the probability that that point gets rain? That would be more matching with definition 1. On the other hand, a lot of people might push back on that, right? If I say, what's the probability it rains in Orange County? If you find somebody who says, I live in Orange County and it rained, then you would say it rained in Orange County. In that definition, the second definition actually makes more sense. So you can argue about these things not only mathematically, but in how you interpret the kind of English of those statements, how you comprehend those statements as well. Now, we've kind of spoiled this already, but let's look at our second question here and talk about this quick. So, in the legacy definition, so that was our confidence times what fraction of the area, what value of A will lead to the two definitions being, there is a value of A that will lead to the two definitions being the same. What is that? Well, we saw that example in the previous question. If the A was 100%, aka as a number, if A is 1, then C times 1 just equals C. So in those two definitions, things would match if we always say we think the rain will come in the entire area. Now, as technology has improved, and again, you can argue this both ways there, you can argue for both definitions, explain why this makes sense, right? So, like I said, a lot of US government agencies, the official agencies, just use this simplified definition, which we now can understand as just saying we're talking about the entire area always when we're doing these predictions, when we're doing these forecasts there. And there's a lot of different arguments you could make here. I want to draw a quick picture again and break it up kind of that way, right? So the argument that's definitely possible, and even in my lifetime I've seen this, right? So we might have, and let me call this an old area. So we have this old area, right? You might say, okay, we have our weather forecast for central Wisconsin, or we have our weather forecast for the New York City area, things like that, right? And this is how a lot of the times weather forecasts were given. You would just talk about a larger area, that's what you would have there. Now, as technology improves, right, what might happen, right? And you can definitely look at this, right? In the past, you would have to search things like, if I was looking for weather, right, I would have to look up my area. What might happen now is that that area gets broken down or split up, right? Nowadays, you can talk about, right, and I'm going to refer to this as new areas there. Instead of Orange County, you can look up a specific city. So maybe that specific area we had before gets broken up into small pieces. So now instead of one area, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 smaller pieces that we have here. And the key idea of this is if we have the smaller forecasting areas, then it makes more sense to just talk about that specific area. One, it's small enough that if you're 80% confident about a small area getting rain, you probably aren't confident enough to break it up into, okay, only the left half or right half is going to get the rain and stuff like that there. So the idea is with these smaller places, right, it doesn't make sense to break it up as much in terms of, okay, I think 50% of that small area will get rain. We can just talk about that smaller area as a whole in that case. Again, This isn't the be-all end-all. There's lots of different things you can do here. Let us know in the comments if you have other thoughts about this, other fun facts about how these weather forecasts or probability of precipitations are calculated. Now stay tuned for a new topic next time, and if you liked this, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to our channel, it really helps us out here. Otherwise, I'll see you all next time. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.